Hi, my name is Michael Lyons from moralinjuryinternational.com. Joining me on the panel tonight is Leo Quillen, who is over there in Ireland, and Marty O'Connor is in Melbourne. I'm in Sydney, actually, and would you believe joining us tonight is our special guest, who is also in Sydney, Aoife Butler. Now, Aoife is a very well-qualified lady in many, many areas, which we'll try and see where we go tonight with that. But she is a registered nurse specializing in mental health care, which is something that we bridge on through moral injury, and we kind of go into that area as well. So we're delighted that you're here as a specialist on that, Aoife. But also she is the reigning Sydney Rose of Tralee, and she's just returned from Ireland, I think in August, after gallivanting around Ireland and having a good time. So Aoife, you're very, very welcome. And lads, you're welcome too to join us all tonight on this program.
Thank you, Michael.
Aoife, we'll just, if you don't mind, we'll go back. You were born in Wexford. Tell us a bit about your life in your early life in Wexford.
Yeah, so I guess I was just saying to you earlier, I was born on the border of Wicklow and Wexford, so it was often a bit controversial. I went to school in Wicklow, but I would be a very proud Wexford woman. So some of my friends like to take a few hints at me about, am I really from Wexford at all? But I was born in a grew up in a small village, just on the border there, where my kind of mom and dad came from. I have a sister and a brother who is deceased, unfortunately. But yeah, I grew up there, went to school there. I would have mainly spent a lot of my life actually living with my grandmother for kind of probably after around 14 I left home. So my granny and my sister would have been primarily my caregivers. So yeah, it was definitely a quiet but very interesting life I've had. But I always say it takes a village to raise a child, and I was very lucky that I had great people in my village that really contributed to who I am.
Yeah. And at that early age, did you have any visions that someday you'd be the Rose of Tralee for Sydney?
Absolutely.
Did you ever want that?
No, absolutely not, which is funny because some contestants would have said, I've grown up with this in my family. I always wanted to be a Rose. But, unfortunately, life was a bit complicated for me growing up, not being with my mom and dad, and just various different, I guess, challenges that I had to get through. And it was just the last thing on my mind that I thought somebody like me at the time could have been a Rose. And I suppose that's probably what's
you mentioned there about your mom and dad and you didn't live with them. Do you want to talk about that later? Maybe why that came out or not?
Oh yeah, look, family always have complicated stories.
Okay,
but,
absolutely, yeah. Leo, do you got anything to ask young Aoife?
No, hello, Aoife. I'm a Galway man by birth, and I often say I'm a Kerry man by inclination. So the role for me was very much in our minds year after year after year come August. But look, you've already raised a question in my mind. You left home about 14 years of age. There's a story there. And obviously you're on to talk about moral injuries. So I suppose if we could hear the story that links into moral injury and tell us what you'd like to tell us, and then afterwards maybe tell us how moral injury is affecting you, if it's affecting you. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. So I'll leave it with you.
Okay, we'll certainly come back to that. Marty, you're sitting back there. You're not smoking, by the way.
I'm smoking my pen, Michael. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Got anything to ask?
No, I think what you asked
life growing up. Marty was raised in the Curragh camp in County Kildare, so he had big walls around him for most of his life. He couldn't get out.
Now, Aoife, I got to say it's a pleasure to have you on the show, and I did meet you at Michael Lyons' day, and it was absolutely lovely. Even though you did dance on my foot, you did tell me about. Even though I have heard you sing, and you've got a lovely voice, by the way. Also, no, Aoife, I'd just like to go back what Michael asked you. There's about your family growing up, and more specifically, if I can just jump in there, because we have talked about this, is I know who's sitting on your right-hand shoulder there is your brother Matthew.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
I'd like you to tell us.
we'll come back to that, Marty.
Oh,
Just,
sorry, I'm jumping the
yeah, I
gun
just want
again.
to stick to the Rose because for years I was involved with the Rose of Tralee as a compere and all that. And I don't know how there's 500 people in a hall and you're standing up there, and are you shaken to bits when you're standing in front of 500 people waiting to be crowned or maybe not crowned, or how do you feel? How do you get through all that?
Um, I guess we're very lucky in the Sydney Centre. We get such an experience, you know, in the whole process of being picked here, because they do such a fantastic job. I feel that it's like everything, you go through these experiences you've done before, and it eventually helps you grow to get to that maybe big point where you're a little bit more able to cope with it. By the time I guess the results of the Rose of Tralee was on TV, we had weeks and months of preparing for it, and going to lots of different events, like being at your one, Michael. Like you get used to, I guess, holding your own and what kind of is going to happen. And of course I was nervous, I was very overwhelmed, but I kind of feel like if you're happy with, like, I wasn't there to win, like neither was I there to win the Sydney Rose. It was more of a personal journey for me. So I suppose I was just so proud anyway. So it wasn't really in my mind of the idea of, I don't know, like what would happen if I won. I was really happy. I couldn't believe I was in that position on the TV, and like it felt like I've watched it growing up as my whole life too. And it was very surreal, to be honest.
So you just set off to Kerry to, are you fairly well controlled down there? You're chaperoned everywhere and all that, or did they let you loose?
No, we're on a regime. Yeah, it's a quite an interesting, again, like experience, because it gives you into that insight of what it must be like for people who like have large followings, because they're told where to go, you're instructed, when to be ready and where you're going and what you're doing, and then you've your escorts that support you and escort you through, and make sure you're on time, and large crowds, because it brings so much to the town of Tralee, lots of kids, and yeah, it's very, very surreal. And even talking about it now, it feels like a dream, like I didn't actually partake in it.
You did very well. Leo, it sounds a little bit like the army, Common and Quinlan. You're
Yes,
fairly well
indeed. Yes,
controlled.
indeed. I was at one of the Rose of Tralee events, a whole week of it almost in Tralee, because I was in the army in Tralee at the time, and I got an invite to it, so I was up close to the stage. So I saw the whole thing. It's quite an achievement the way they run everything, So yes, and as a result of that, I'm kind of switched on to the Rose of Tralee every August.
And
Yeah.
Leo, do you notice an uptake in tourists, maybe going through your gallery or something from the Rose?
Yes,
Tourists and all
yes,
that? Yeah.
indeed. And thank you last year, Sydney. Got a lot of people from Australia coming through my gallery as a result of viewing it in Tralee. No, I don't know how many million is worth at the town of Tralee. Somebody said 10, 15, 20 million just for
Yeah.
that 10 or whatever. But certainly it's a big thing, and they do it well. They do it very well. And Dahi, the guy who was comparing it, I know him, and
Oh, yeah. He's a nice
they're in
fellow.
Gold. His brother's my next door neighbor, and I know his family.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
So it's a big thing. It's a big
Yeah.
thing.
Well, Fiona, congratulations on all that. Most of the Rose of Tralee girls I've spoken to afterwards, even the ones that didn't say win, there's a kind of no winner in a way. The Rose of Tralee is more of an experience. And they've all said that being in the experience have helped them tremendously in like, got them out, they're able to speak more openly to groups, and the self-esteem and everything is lifted by just being in the pageant itself. Would that be true?
Absolutely. Like I was saying, even while we were there and afterwards, like getting to go there is the winning, like that whole experience. That's what you win. Like you win, everyone, we were all winners in that space, because it's such like the tour started in Wexford, and not to go straight back to my childhood, but for someone who had left home and didn't grow up in, you know, your normal dynamic, and I guess got through a lot of challenges. I was so overwhelmingly supported by my community, you know, to come back and be an international Rose, and that's kind of why I really wanted to do it, and the biggest thing I've got out of it. But you know, it also brought some of my family together. Family members came down to Kerry and went on holidays. You know, they might have never done that before, and I always say it healed a little bit of my inner child, which I think, you know, no words or money can really put that into context, because it's such a personal journey.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely, it's changed me like completely, of the person that I am since 2023.
That's fantastic. Yeah, great. Well, Fiona, you did speak. I know you and Marty have been speaking about parts of your life as well. You were in. You suddenly found yourself in Sydney, Australia. So, Marty, do you want to come in on that one?
Well, I just go back to the question I asked. If I know Matthew is one of your, and that's a big reason why you went in. So tell us a little bit about Matthew. I know there's stuff out there, but from your mouth.
Yeah, so obviously my brother Matthew, he was the middle child. I'm the baby, and I have an eldest sister, Michelle. And as I spoke before to you, Marty, Matthew came out on a working holiday visa like many other expats, back in around 2013, I would say. Very typical of young Irish men, didn't really finish school and get into the college scene, so he was very much into trades and working on a farm and, you know, machinery and stuff like that. So he came out to Australia back then, was only coming for a year. I cried with the idea of him leaving. And yeah, he absolutely loved it. I actually wrote a poem that I read at his funeral, and in it I said, you know, he left a boy and became a man. And I really, you know, always say that about Matthew. And he was in Australia, in Sydney here, for 3.5 years, where, you know, unfortunately he didn't get to come home in the time, because he tragically passed away here. And, you know, that was such a big reason to why I came out to Australia kind of since then. But just in terms of, I guess, who Matthew was, like he was into the GAA. He, you know, was a young lad who probably didn't know how to use a washing machine, but, you know, came out on his own and learned it all. Like us, many of us, when we go traveling, we have to become more independent, and just grew really into himself, and was very well supported by the Central Coast GAA. And yeah, just loved his life. And really, I felt, you know, watching from afar and on social media and talking to him, he was starting to grow into himself. He was just short of a month of 26 when he passed away. And obviously that, yeah, came as very tragic news to us and the family back home.
And had you any intention of coming to Australia before Matthews? You had.
Yeah, so I guess, like, I was always on to him, and it's funny now I get to see it from his perspective, and I always reflect on that. I couldn't understand why he wouldn't come home, you know. Sure, why can't you come home? Will you come home for my 21st? Will you come home for this? You know, I miss you. And I suppose it was just so expensive, and I kind of think as well, a part of it for him, money assume, and I suppose is, you know, it wasn't easy for him to leave, but I would think it would be hard for him to come back and then have to go, you know, go back home and then have to go back maybe. And I think he was maybe not as keen. So I said, you know, I was studying my nursing at home in Ireland at the time. And I said, once I'm finished that, I'll come out and see him and work there. And, you know, the nurses always had a great lifestyle, he always would tell me. So that was the goal, really, was once I qualified, was to come out to him, which he was very excited about. And yeah, that was definitely on the plan. But I was actually in my final year, my 4th year of studying, when he passed away. So yeah, it was a very hard time in my life.
Yeah. Leo, Marty, then?
Leo, I'll bring Leo in there, please,
Yeah.
Leo.
Aoife, I don't know the circumstances of Matt's passing, and I don't expect you to tell us much about it, okay? But seeing as we're here, let's say, a Moral Injury International, obviously there was an effect, as it would be, on you, not to mention your family, on this. So is this a time that you'd like to tell us a little bit how it affected you? Is it affecting you still under the umbrella of moral injury? Is that
Yeah,
something that I could ask you about?
yeah, look, I think I suppose so my brother, he took his own life, unfortunately, which is obviously, you know, I work as a mental health clinician. I was in my final year. Everyone always asks me, is that why I got into mental health? But I was already in it, ironically enough. And, you know, I guess there's definitely been a journey of, you know, my own from a clinical point of view and a professional point of view and understanding that, but then complicated by my upbringing and the challenges I think that I would have felt we had growing up. Interestingly enough, maybe there is an element of moral injury, how I would feel in that circumstance of I always say, you know, the cards that life, or the hand that I was dealt in life. But you know, through growing up and experiencing other people's lives, I've definitely understood that everyone has a story and everyone has been dealt a set of cards, and it's about kind of just how we manage that, or play, I kind of say, at the game of life. But yeah, it's definitely, look, it's been a long journey that I think will always stay with me, from the point of view of trying to just get through my final year, and being able to qualify at that time, when Matthew passed away. And then, you know, being at home and making the decision to come to Australia was difficult because my family didn't really want me to go, because they'd already had this kind of negative connotation to Australia, and you know, the journey of trying to repatriate him and stuff. But I think for me, I've always been very strong in knowing, maybe it's my mental health background, but you know, I wanted to take control of anything that I could do, and I needed to go on that journey of grief and self-reflection and growth as well, I guess, to be a good person and to be able to not allow my whole life affect me negatively, maybe in a way. I don't know. It's definitely something that I probably still think about often. And in regards to like moral injury, I guess you do feel a bit hard done by at times, or you feel like, maybe how are you meant to cope with this? And you know, should there have been other people to protect me from that and those things, which is an interesting. And that's what I was kind of saying to Marty, like I hadn't really heard of it before until I went to Michael Lyons' night, and I've reflected a bit. Michael was saying even about nurses and how they, after COVID, might have experienced moral injury. So definitely in the last couple of days, I feel like it's a little bit of a journey I'm probably thinking about currently, even for myself, I think.
Well, Aoife, thank you for sharing that. It's not easy. But the journey you took after Matthew's demise is probably the journey that we are kind of in Moral Injury Internet trying to encourage people to take, not to suffer in silence. You know, not to go inward into yourself and not do anything about it. You made a conscious decision to know, I'm not going to go down that road. I'm not going to go through the grief, even though it hurts you, I'm sure. And no matter how many tablets or medication you take, it's still there the next day. It's still in there and it's hurting you. So that's probably what I know Marty or Leo, that's what we're trying to achieve with other people. Say, please come out and talk to somebody, because I'm sure you will agree, by talking you do, it's a self-healing thing in itself, rather than close the door and not and be silenced. So that's kind of our mission.
I think it's really important because, like, life, you know, I always think life will, it's not that life is hard. People will experience challenges in their own way. And what I might go through might be not half of what, you know, I've heard stories of Marty, or, you know, the next person, or equally might be less. Who knows? You can't compare your troubles to the next person. But you know, I always felt like I have a responsibility for myself, for my story, for who I am and who I want to be. And despite the things that I've been given, or the cards that I was given, I wanted to always do the best with them. And tablets sometimes won't be the answer, or, you know, you do have to kind of say, okay, this is my life, accept that, and you mightn't like it, or you mightn't have wanted it. No one rarely does want trauma or bad things to happen to them. But what am I going to do with it, and how do I keep going? And I honestly believe, like, that's why I feel in the last year, even this year, I become this like butterfly almost, like, you know, I was cocooning, coping, trying to deal with all these things that I have been through. And through the Rose of Tralee or whatever it is, you know, I also qualified my master's, and, you know, there was a time when I didn't know if I could go to college because I couldn't afford to, and no one was going to pay for me to go, and I failed my leaving cert. And like now I'm able to financially put myself through a master's in Australia, do the Rose of Tralee, you know, represent my country and my brother, and all those things. And in a way, the journey through life has got me here, because I haven't went in and given up, and, you know, I faced it, I think I'd like to say.
Marty, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Aoife, what was your inspiration? You did speak about your grandmother and that day. What your inspiration? I know you can sing, you can't dance. I danced with you, you broke my foot. But what was your inspirations in life? Because you're a very powerful young lady. You're the same age as my daughter, and the fact that you're you know, it's a tough one. I know, I've been through the journey in a different age barrier. But who inspired you? What was your biggest out of your family? You don't need to pick on anyone that you don't need to, but what gives you the strength or the way you do it as a young girl?
It's not that I don't know. Obviously, I have, you know, my nanny, Aggie, and my sister are two very big, strong main characters in my life. And, you know, my later life, when Matthew passed away, I suppose that kind of encourages me to live a life for both of us, because I always say he's not here to live his now. But I always kind of felt, as a young person, I'm very empathetic and very aware. And I've always appreciated the kindness of others, and I can't, like, I want to write a book someday, I told you that, but like, so many people played a massive part in my life when I was younger. From, you know, Mick gave me my first job when I was 14 in a shop, and what that gave me, and, you know, the kindness of other people. Like, I really, really appreciated it, and I always felt that I needed to give back. Like, I needed to prove to them that I'm so grateful that they have done this. Like my nanny, I'm so grateful that, you know, at 70 something years of age, you took your youngest granddaughter in, and my sister was in her early 20s when she was raising me, and I wanted to always show that it wasn't for nothing, like that. I wanted to say thank you, and the way I could say thank you was to be successful and be okay, I suppose. And then I guess I would look a lot to like other inspirational like stories or videos, or, you know, reading quotes or different things. And when Matthew died, I felt, you know, prior to that, I, you know, had failed my leaving cert. Didn't know if I was going to go to college. I couldn't get a grant. I wasn't living with my parents. Like, life was a bit complicated. And when he died, I thought at the time, oh my God, is God testing me that I can, like, he's pushing me to not be able to survive in a weird way. And then my granddad died on the day of my brother's funeral. My only granddad. And life definitely felt very challenging. And I told you that at the time I'd read about Abraham Lincoln, and like, I was just very receptive to these stories, I think. But I had read a story about, I didn't know it was about him, but it was about a young boy from Kentucky who had had a hard life, and, you know, his mother died from milk poisoning, and his wife died, and all these things that happened to him and the challenges he'd went through. And it wasn't until he was 46 he became the 16th president of America, and, you know, abolished slavery and all those things. And like, I don't know everything about American politics. It wasn't that. It was just a story at that time in my life resonated with me, because the quote was, a leader with little experience in pain is a leader not willing or worthy of following. And so I just kept telling myself, maybe I'll do something great someday. Maybe this is for something, like maybe I'll change someone's life, or maybe, you know, the story will help somebody and it'll be worth it. And I don't know, I've always
I think you've changed a lot of people's lives as you talk. Can I just jump in there, Michael? Sorry for a second.
Of course, go ahead.
And just
Absolutely.
tell me about, you said about your sister raising you. I can kind of relate to this story. Tell us a little bit about your sister and how that.
Yeah, look, it was definitely challenging at the time because that dynamic of, you know, your sister being your mother and trying to curtail a teenage girl, I'm sure it wasn't always as sweet as I might hear now. But Michelle has always been the stoic, strong person in our family, and you know, she always taught me that I could, you know, not have whatever I want, but to strive for whatever I wanted despite our challenges. And she's very successful and married, and you know, has always made me feel like at Christmases when we couldn't afford presents, she would make some way work. And I think she very much sheltered me as the youngest, probably more even than I know. I always say I probably block out some things when I was younger that I can't remember that she probably does. But yeah, I was very grateful. I am very grateful. She's definitely a role model of mine, and I look up to her massively. And she's just the strong person that's just always kept going, and you know, telling me how proud she is of me and giving me the love that I need, I suppose, as a young person growing up.
Leo, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, it's very interesting, Aoife, the way you're talking, because you said a few words there. You said support, who may have supported you, might not have supported you, and so on. I'd like if you could expand a bit on that. The reason I'm saying this is that moral injury to us, because we're coming originally from a military point of view, is when the guys suffered a particular trauma, they found that there was no support for them afterwards. And as a result of that, they began to suffer moral injury. Can you relate to this in some way? Because you mentioned the support. I know you're a very strong person. I lived with a very strong person, my dad, and he suffered from moral injury, but was able to manage it by being a bit silent, etc. But you are a very strong person. You're well able to manage life, I think. And you've got a kind of a self-healing process from listening to you. I think you've developed a self-healing process. Is that something to support self-healing that you might like to expand a bit more on? Lack of support, I should say.
Yeah, look, I think I suppose maybe what comes to my mind when you say that was and thinking about moral injury, like it wasn't always like perfect either. I suppose this is just, you know, when you get older, I think your memories and you have a stronger way of putting a summary of your life in the picture. But you know, I think in school I wouldn't have had a great time, and I probably felt I wasn't supported great in school, and I probably do feel like I've a little bit of suffer from moral injury in that space, because I think, you know, I didn't receive the support I should have. You know, I think looking back as someone who didn't live at home, and I think, you know, you can often be categorized in school of where you are at academically and things like that. And so there's definitely spaces where I felt I could have been supported better based on, you know, my situation. And but then equally, I don't know if I want to say the word is lucky, but you know, when I did get to uni or college, I had great support, and my lecturers and my, you know, small class were the reasons how I got through maybe my final year of college. And I think that's how I always learn. Like I've always say there's two faces to each scenario. Like I've probably seen it in a traumatic phase, but after a while, eventually I've seen the good side, and I've seen the support and the kindness from people. And for some reason, I'm very receptive to that, whether it's my personality or what. But I'm very much like, it's nicer to believe that there's human kindness and that, you know, things will work out than, I guess, believing that it won't. But I do think for me, that was, you never know struggling, you know, that kind. One thing, you might assume the person has support, you might assume that the person, you know, someone's reached out to that person, but it only takes one person to believe in you and to stay there and to tell you that you can do it, or to maybe give you the contact details of the place where you need to go. And I don't know, for me, as I said, I don't want to say I was lucky because obviously, you know, lots of stuff has happened to me, but I do feel like at times when I didn't feel supported, maybe it's through my determination, I eventually was able to seek out support as well. I'm very open as a person. I think that's probably helped me.
Aoife, you said there, sorry, you said there earlier, you said there's a percentage of, and I understand what you were saying there with more injury fixed different people down the track. What would you say the percentage of yours growing up, as you said, we're not going to go into your parents, but growing up because you were obviously let down at some stage as a younger person, which I always believe is, you know, I'm not going into my story, we've done enough for that, but as in if you're let down by a parent that you look up to, do you find that's part of moral injury? Would you agree or disagree with that?
Oh yeah, and like I think again, I'm thinking from my experience, so like my study and stuff, like you're automatically going to have more or be more challenges with relationships and, you know, different things when you do have, you know, a kind of such a foundational, when people like keys, people like your parents or, you know, foundational support people, if they do let you down or if there's been trauma there, I think like statistically you're going to probably have more challenges with relationships, or, you know, it kind of does shape maybe your personality a little bit. I definitely think that I, you know, I would not fear of abandonment and stuff like that, but they talk about the attachment theories and Bowlby attachment theory of how you base your relationships with different people, which is going from your childhood. So if you've, you know, a parent that wasn't there or you couldn't rely on, or, you know, then you'll be anxiously attached. And I've done obviously a lot of learning in that in my work, but also self-learning. And I do think that that carries through. And I think I always say it probably always will carry through. But it's about being aware of that and learning about it so that it doesn't affect me negatively as much as I can control, I suppose. Yeah. But I definitely think it does still hang in there in my life. Yeah, for sure.
Aoife, when Matthew left, did the dynamics change in your family with your parents? And I sensed there was something going on, but did anything change in the family? Because it would have affected everybody, I'm sure.
When he passed away, do you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, absolutely. I was in America actually at the time, and I was in San Diego doing a J1. And I had to fly home there. I found out over there on my own and had to fly home on my own, which was obviously very challenging. I was only 21, I think. Yeah, I was 21 at the time. And I do think from there it brought lots of my family's members together that maybe the relationships weren't so close with. And I think in particular my dad, I have a much better relationship with my dad now. And, you know, he was in Tralee and was a part of the Rose of Tralee, which is really big. And so, you know, I guess healing for me as well, to have that relationship now. I think when you get older as well, you grow to accept situations or not, if it's whatever is, you know, your decision. But I guess you're more empowered to have that decision when you're older. And I definitely think, you know, losing Matthew healed some relationships, some not. But I think, you know, that speaks for itself sometimes too. But I think it brought, you know, the right people together. And yeah, it doesn't, I think when you lose somebody, and I'm sure you all know yourselves, like it doesn't just end there. It'll be a constant part of your life, like, and you're constantly going through it, you know, different stages. Whether you get married or if you have children, or when I moved to Australia, like grief will be there and trying to figure that out. There's many complexities to a family dynamic, but yeah,
you said there when you lose someone, and I'm in no way comparing losing someone in the sense of they pass away to somebody with a moral injury. In a way, we have lost them. They've gone silent. They're out of this world. They don't want to come back in. They feel ashamed. They feel the regret. They feel that they've done something bad, you know, because of whatever happened. in their life, something that violated their own sense of what I'm about, what my soul is about, what my inner self is about. We do, in a way, lose them until such time as someone, as it's fantastic that you got to get someone to try and get them to come out. And that's not easy, but that's what I think we here, we're trying to do. We have so many stories of people with issues. I say, then what can we do about it? How can we get these people out like you? What you've been through is unbelievable. But now you're so strong, and you're an advocate for the mental health. You do all these things. You're an educator. Do you think there is some analogy there, Leo?
Yes.
Someone who had a moral injury?
Yes. A couple of things come. And I've said it already, Aoife, you're a very strong person, and you're a survivor. Now, I know a lot of people in the military sense who have suffered from moral injury and didn't quite realize what they were suffering from, probably until we started talking to them about this about 3-4 years ago. And some are strong like you, and they can manage it. It hits them every now and again, but they're able to manage. They function very well in their families. They go silent at times. Others were not able to manage it. And unfortunately, 5 of them ended up like your brother Matthew. Others ended up in very, very bad ways with relationships, lack of relationships, alcohol problems, 2 in mental homes for a short period of time, etc., etc. So what you're describing, I suppose, is a moral injury person who is a survivor. And that's to your credit. And because you're very intelligent, your inner strength that developed as a result of everything you've been through. So you're probably, from our point of view, you're a perfect example of about how somebody can survive and recover from moral injury, which is great. And that's what's coming out of this interview, our chat with you. Because as we've said before, what we're about is raising the awareness of moral injury. Not here to tell you how you heal yourself. We're not experts, but now I think with you, we've got an expert. We've got an example that when this podcast goes out, other people say, look at this young lady. Now I know what I can do. So thank you for that.
Sometimes
PTSD, as you know, is different to moral injury. Moral injury is not medical, or it's not mental. It's that inner part of you that's injured, that's some way damaged by what you've seen or what you've experienced or what you've done bad. You've done something bad. How do people clog up, and I suppose our only we don't have any expertise because we're not trained in any way, but from my experience in working in St. Vincent's, where now as a lay chaplain, we would just learn to listen. That's all. Was my only tool. Listen to the person and see where the story is going, and from that, when I reflect back now, a lot of them had a moral injury, but I didn't recognize it then. We'd refer them to the psychologist or the counselor or something. But when I think back now, I had many people who I know now they had done something wrong, and it was cutting them, it was inside, and they were looking for a way to someone to heal it. And you can take all the tablets and medicine you like, but the next day they were still it still affected them. So I'm sure in your journey in mental health, do you now ever feel that you have been involved with someone with maybe a moral injury as opposed to a mental issue?
I suppose it's kind of hard for me to say because I work primarily in the emergency department. So I feel that people are so acutely, in the crisis. And I think, at that stage, it's very hard to determine what's going on for the person. It could be multifaceted.
There's so much going on,
Yeah. And I think, I don't know if you'd agree, but like some people might be suffering a moral injury, but it might be complicated by a trauma background, or I don't know, so it mightn't be as straightforward. And sometimes, and I think that for me, I always say about mental health or mental well-being, whatever way you want to describe it, us as humans, like it's not straightforward life. Like we're not the medical field. It's not you broke your arm, you go in, you get an x-ray, you put a cast on it, and now you'll be better. Like we're very complex human beings, and moral injuries is another part of that, which, as you said, you are all raising awareness to it, because it isn't spoke about. Like I hadn't heard about it until, and I'm the mental health professional. And yeah, I think there's an underlying element for lots of people who are going through that emergency, or that if they're struggling with their mental health. I'd like to think, maybe not research it because I'm not a researcher, but have a look into it more, or maybe have a think about it more from my professional experiences, what's really going on. Because if it's not in the forefront of your mind, people don't think about it. But now it would be interesting to see really what is going on. And sometimes people just want an understanding, like, oh, this, as you kind of Leo was saying, this is what may be happening for me. So many people responded to that because they weren't aware, or they weren't aware of what that is. So definitely it'll be interesting to think about, I think, in the future, and I think maybe in a less acute environment, you'd be able to have that conversation to really identify what's going on with the person.
Working in emergency, you don't have much time to spend on anything. You're going like a
we're kind of responding to the fire a little bit more, so it can be.
Leo, in your latest podcast, which was brilliant, you also spoke about the cultural part of us as a person, like different cultures, and you particularly made reference to the Irish, where we're all mainly Catholic, and our faith, well, maybe not as strong as it used to be, but it used to be in the period of Leo was talking about back maybe 60 years ago. It was very much part of our growing up, and if we did something wrong or bad, something that transgressed or violated our being, I suppose the fact that we were religious kind of put attitude. Would you say that, Leo? Am I trying to say that so cultures could vary how we see things? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Aoife, what Michael was referring to is the religious thing that, well, okay. What we're talking about is that it's a military thing where the Irish did something in a battle. They killed a lot of people. This went against their religious upbringing, their family environment, and it affected them inside. And this comes to the point I wanted to make. Moral injury really sets in from what we understand. Moral injury sets in when, as a second whammy of a double whammy. The first wham is somebody dying tragically, you doing something very bad, being involved in something, but then being betrayed or not supported, not getting the support from family, not getting support from the bosses, from the people that you at a higher level. And then you say, and Michael touched on it, you feel ashamed. You think, oh, I've done something wrong, when you haven't. And that's where moral injury sets in. I just thought I'd mention this because you said you're going to kind of do a bit more thinking about moral injury and so on. From our limited experience, perhaps, everybody who tells us a story about moral injury, they've had the second whammy. They've had the first one when they suffered something, and the second one came in and it was eating away at them for years and years because they were not supported by family or, as I said, higher authority, and they felt betrayed and they felt they did something wrong. So in the Irish scenario, because of the kind of people we are, supposedly anyway, a bit religious, moral injury has been often identified as an injury to the soul. inside you, not something that you can put your finger on medically, perhaps, but it's inside. And I just throw that out to you as something that you might think about.
Marty, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, can I say there what you're talking about, Leo, is very, very good. And if I can go, Eva, I think you would understand more so transgenerational moral injury, where you're let down by, which we've spoken personally, we don't need to go into all the details, but let down by, you know, whether it be your parent or whoever, you're let down. And then also part of it is guilt. And I'm sure, I don't need you to answer this, but I'm sure that your family went through, and especially you, because you've got that side to you, is when Matthew took his life, you would have felt guilt. Could I have done something better? Could I have gone to Australia earlier? Could I have stopped? You know, it's the same with my family, and I think that's what transgenerational is with moral injury. You're let down. It's not necessarily just in the army, as Leo said. It obviously goes in nursing, everything like that, but in your own personal thing. You know, what
Well,
would you say about
we
that?
did a lot of actually away from the army. The moral injury occurs when a person perpetrates, witnesses, or fails to prevent an act of behavior that violates their own sense of morality. And that's, you do something bad, and
So
it's and the
yeah.
soul is damaged, and the only way I can feel we've come to a conclusion is in the community. There's a lot of help within the community, as opposed to going to maybe a counselor or a psychiatrist. The experts say the community themselves are probably better at healing. So if you can get a group of like-minded people who are prepared to be open and talk about it, that in itself has a better chance of healing them than maybe sitting for an hour with a psychiatrist or a counselor or something. Now, their effects that are borne out. So again, we encourage people to form a group if you can, and not dive into it, but over a period of time develop it, let it develop, and people will start to talk. And if you can listen to someone without judging them, without criticizing them, and just listen to them, that in itself has a healing power.
As you always said, Michael, let's not don't suffer in silence.
Silent, yeah. Leo.
Just suffer in silence. Yeah. But Leo, go ahead there, please.
Yeah, sorry. Well, you said something very important there, Michael, and for Aoife's information. I've discovered only in the last year or two that the veterans that we're talking about, sorry, Aoife, that we're talking about military people again, because it happens everywhere. But the people that suffered most, I think, are the people who lived away from the community. We had, let's say, veterans they came back from the army, they dispersed, but some of them all lived in the same town, and they would meet almost on a weekly basis. A little bit like now you have the men's sheds in Ireland where all the retired men meet, and it's a great thing. But in the moral injury situation, they were meeting, they were talking, and they didn't necessarily talk about the problem within them, but the fact that they were meeting with like-minded people all the time was a healing process. But I do know that the people who were on their own, who had left that area and had retired, and they were living in, I won't mention the names of the places in Ireland because they know who I'm talking about, they suffered worse, in my opinion, from what I'm hearing, because they didn't have a community kind of like-minded people to chat with on a regular basis.
Yeah, and we had a lot of stories from nurses, and we've interviewed people, the police in, I think it was Dallas, some policemen there, and we also interviewed firemen, and the one commonality between the two was they say they were betrayed by the higher authority. They were leaving the police force, and it was, oh, he's just burned out and he's leaving and he wants to spend more time with his family. But the truth, when they did a scale from 1 to 5, the number 1 was that they were betrayed while they were in there, some way by their higher authority. They didn't get promoted, or maybe they're entitled to a medal that they didn't get. They were put on duties just to penalize them. All that type of stuff went on. So it's not just the army or Ross, anyone on the front line who's confronted with who's got to dive in and do something to help other people.
I think
Probably, yeah.
like I'm just thinking like it's really interesting what you're saying, because like the community or group setting, or like, you know, we know that like years ago, years and years and years ago, we survived in a pack, like as people, like you know, and I wonder through moral injury or trauma, like, you know, that sense of community, that sense of familiarity, that sense that that person gets it or understands it, that more healing because you are surrounded by like-minded people. So like, does it go back to that? That's how we were made, like really is the understanding of similarity, may it be in people just surviving and hunting, or maybe people who are suffering or going through a moral injury or going through like those groups that has their science there to show AA, like people will respond better when they feel heard by people who understand what they're saying or going through. So just interesting.
Yeah. And in your profession is there anything new happening in the world of mental care that's or is it just it's always been the same? Or
Look, I think I'm very passionate about mental health, and I think that it's, as I said, it's very complex and grey. It's not black and white, it's grey, because I think we have a lot of learning still to do, and we've came far, but I think, you know, it's just so complex, because not one human being will experience something the same, and will come from a very different story than the next, and so it will affect us differently. So I think, you know, there'll be no cure or like fix anytime soon, but it's about wanting to be open-minded and passionate and wanting to learn about it. And one of the things that just comes into my mind is something that we didn't have in Ireland when I trained is these like safe haven cafes. And I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're the kind of like suicide prevention cafes or areas where people who would have experienced suicidal ideation or thoughts of suicide or self-harm, and they come to a non-clinical environment where it's peer-led, so led by other people who also experience it. And they are supported, they can talk to people, they can engage, they aren't isolative, and they have had massive, you know, positive stories out of that, more so probably than the emergency department situation. And similar to peer workers, we have peer support workers now in mental health, so there are people with lived experience who work with our team, with the patients and the clients, from a completely non-medical background. They come from that experience base, and I do think that that's the future in a way too, maybe for a lot of it. And I think for me personally, you know, you all have said you're not an expert in the space. Just because you don't have a degree, in my opinion, doesn't mean you're any less an expert than you know, the person who does, because it's my life experience that makes me a good clinician, I think, because I can be empathetic and understanding to the person who's in distress. And for you all who are doing this and trying to support people, it will mean more to them that they can talk to someone who listens and is non-judgmental and maybe might have some kind of background, I think, than somebody who's just got a degree on the wall to tell you what's wrong.
So have you got any ways and means of encouraging people to come out of their darkness and into the light?
I feel like role modeling, like we learn really well by role.
Yes, you can be we spoke about this the other night. You can be a role model, and we use the word a champion for the younger people talking about it.
Yeah. I always, and I would journal a lot, and I've journals from, you know, when I wasn't in a positive space, and I always used to say, you know, maybe this is my story, maybe God is testing me, maybe, you know, whatever. I was probably self-deprecating at the time, but for whatever it was, if it is and it just saves one person, if I'm meant to do this for somebody, then it will make my story worth living. Like, I had that idea, and I just think that's why the Rose of Tralee was such a fantastic thing for me, because it's put me into, you know, contact with people like ye, like, and, you know, just meeting different people, like, just talking, being that person and saying, like, as Leo said, I'm very honored that, I look back at my younger self and to know that I can be the light to show someone that you can survive and, that you can make a difference and be the survivor. I think that will make my story much easier to bear.
We're kind of coming to the end of our time. Eva, can I ask you a question? Is there at any times on your journey that you relapse or you fall off the horse, that things get tough and you've got to get back on again? And
oh yeah, like life is. I'm also a woman, so I have lots of emotions.
Good answer there.
I'm very well aware of that, so stay clear sometimes. But oh look, I definitely I am not always smiling because life isn't always easy, and there'll be times that are challenging. My nanny's actually not well at the moment at all, and that's a journey in itself. And I nearly foresee the down period of that, but it's about the more you understand yourself and the more that you can work on yourself and have an understanding of moral injury or what you're going through or whatever it is, then you can come to a space where you know what you need to do when you are feeling down. You put these measures into place, because there's no point telling somebody that, oh, I'm cured now, everything's going to be fine, and look at Aoife, she's great. Like, I still have inner thoughts, I still struggle, I'll still have down days, and I'll probably still have interpersonal relationship challenges, but it's about putting things in place for when I mightn't be able to see that light through the darkness, to remind me and to know what to do and who to go to, I suppose, when I do need that.
Well, if moral injury or post-traumatic stress, what you're talking about, it's the same thing if you do get into a bad place. It's just to work yourself back into it again. And I'm sure people with moral injury do often relapse as well. It's just the way life is. But listen, you've been a wonderful person to talk to. Your advocacy for mental health is absolutely amazing. And from now on, I'm sure in your speaks, you'll be talking about moral injury as well, as part of the package of people not being well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'd like to just thank you sincerely for being with us this evening. So Leo, I'll leave a word to you, and then Marty.
Yeah, Aoife, it's been a pleasure to listen to you and to meet you in this fashion, and thank you very, very much for everything you've told us. Just leave you with some thoughts. About 2 years ago, I met somebody from the National Health Service in England, a theatre nurse, and chatting about moral injury. She'd never heard of it, but penny dropped immediately. That's us. That is us. We've been neglected by the higher authorities. In the National Health Service in Ireland, some people I know said the same thing. So it's right, it's everywhere. So in the field that you're in, you can be sure that moral injury exists, and you, as Marty says, become a champion for it. And you're a very strong person. You are a survivor. I've met people like you many times, so the future is pretty good for you, and I wish you the very best.
Thank you very much.
Well, Eva, all I can say, it's been a pleasure to meet you. You're the same age as my daughter. You're an inspiration for young people. You carry Matthew on your shoulder. You're an amazing girl. You can't dance, but I know you can sing, so that's okay. But all I can say to you is keep up what you're doing, and thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much. And I've already grabbed the torch from the three of you, so I hope that I'll be able to carry it in some way too.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Our special guest, Aoife Butler, and that ends our program for today. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank to our listeners in Moral Injury and all over the world and here in Australia, and go to our website, Moral Injury International.